Good afternoon. We're going to do this next section where we're going to be focusing on particularly the program narrative. And this is really in most proposals, this is going to be the largest section. And for your RFP, it's generally going to be the section worth the most points. So because of that, it has to be compelling, it has to be impactful, and it has to contain the necessary information so an individual understands exactly what you're trying to do with your program, and more specifically, who it's designed to benefit and what those benefits are. Basically, a couple of things we're really going to focus on. And the first one is how to create impactful goals and objectives. And I would generally argue your programs and your proposals live and die by your goals and objectives. If you don't have strong goals or a strong objective, you're not going to have a strong project. It also becomes much more difficult to evaluate. But they also need to be concise. And more importantly, we're also going to show you how to work with logic models, which I think are one of the most important tools in program development. So we'll spend a little time breaking down what a logic model is and the different components of it. And finally, showing you how to use those logic models that will dramatically help you improve your program development process as well as your evaluation. When we're talking about a program narrative, it basically explains the need for this project. It boils down to what's the project going to do, what will be accomplished, and what it will be. And it answers the basics: who, what, when, where, how, and whys. And you have to answer all of these in the narrative. And it's usually going to be broken down by about 5 different sections: goals and objectives, proposed activities, and we're going to focus on those today. The other 3 parts tend to be staffing and management, organizational capability, and evaluation. But again, for today's purposes, we're going to focus primarily on goals and objectives, as well as the activities you're going to propose and the logic model. When we're talking about goals, keep in mind, they establish the overall direction and focus of a program. It's basically you saying, we're creating this project or this program to address this need. It's basically the condition or the behavior you expect to change. So when you boil it down, it really goes to what will be different in this community or with these individuals as a result of your program. And that's where we're trying to go. It's going to be general. And if you have multiple goals, then you want to list them in order of priority. Whichever is the main goal of this project or this program, you want to list first. I always recommend you have no more than 3 goals. More than 3 goals, unless the funder specifically asks for it, ends up becoming a very complex proposal because every goal has objectives. And by the time you get done with all of that, the program tends to be very broad and diffuse, and you don't want that. You want your programs concise and you want them tight. And more importantly, you want to make sure that these goals can lead to one or more measurable results. Some of these type of sample goals, and again, they're general. You may say we want to delay and prevent high-risk behaviors in middle school age adolescents, 11 to 14-year-olds, including substance abuse, violence, premature sexual activity, by fostering development of positive personal characteristics. By this goal, I understand what your project is trying to do. You want to delay and prevent high-risk behaviors, and you've spelled out what the high-risk behaviors were: substance use, violence, premature sexual activity, and more importantly, you're going to do this by fostering development of positive personal characteristics. And I know you're targeting middle school age adolescents, 11 to 14. That's a pretty solid overall goal. Or even though it may not have as much verbiage, but still, you want to improve the academic achievement of students that regularly attend the Academic All-Star program. Again, overall, I know what you want to do. You want to achieve the academic performance of who? The students that regularly attend the Academic All-Stars program. So in both of the examples in the sample goals, I understand from a funding standpoint what I'm paying for. Along with the actual goals, I would say, which is probably more important, is the objectives. And the objectives really provide the specifics of a program. It's going to answer things such as who is going to be impacted or changed, what's going to happen, when will it happen, and how much change will take place. More importantly, how will this change be measured? It's giving you the nuts and the bolts of a program. And really, You're letting the funder know here is what the funding is paying for. It's paying for the successful accomplishment of these objectives. Now, you've always heard SMART objectives, and let me explain to you exactly what we're talking about. And every objective should be SMART. It should be specific. It's going to clearly describe the action to be taken. And more importantly, it will clearly identify who you're working with. It's not sufficient to say we're working with youth. Well, what age youth? Where do they live? Are they in the district? Are they in a certain community within the district? You want to get specific. Also, it needs to be measurable. Any objective will basically let us know how much of a change we can expect to see. And it's measurable, and that's important in terms of evaluation. But also, it is achievable. If you often wonder why funders ask for things such as your organizational chart, your organizational budget, your past grant history, well, they want to make sure that what you're doing is achievable based on the current resources that you have. And we're talking both revenue you have in place, as well as staff resources, and looking at the grant resources. Because if they look at your program and they look at your organization and they realize, based on the resources that you currently have, both staffing capability and cash resources, they'll ask themselves the question, can you pull this off? So your objectives need to be achievable with the current resources you have and with the grant resources. If it's not, then you're not likely to get funded. Also, they want to know that it's realistic, that you've considered the barriers. You understand the limitations in terms of the community or the individuals or your own organization, and you anticipate the potential problems. But more importantly, not only did you anticipate them, but you have an answer for them. And of course, last but not least, it is time defined. There's a specific period of time in which a person can expect to see these outcomes or these objectives achieved. So again, all objectives need to be SMART objectives. We're generally talking about two types of objectives when we talk about objectives. One is a process objective, the other one is an outcome objective. When I speak of a process objective, we're basically focusing on activities that are going to be completed in a specific time period. A lot of times funders will ask you to produce a work plan or a timeline in terms of when events should occur or activities will take place. Well, in these instances, we're actually looking at your process objectives because they let us know that you're implementing the program as you said you would, when you said you would. For example, a process objective may be 85% of regular attendees will participate in at least one nutrition class throughout the program year. Well, as the program year goes on, they can look at week to week and see, are you hitting that number of 85% attending this class? That's important to a funder because you will never get the outcomes you're looking for if you don't implement the program correctly. It lets them know that you're on task. It lets them know also when they need to have resources available to you. But it also, more importantly, lets them know that if we need to make adjustments, we can make adjustments sooner than later. Again, your process objectives are going to tend to be tied to your work plans or your timelines. And again, it's just a matter of, are you implementing the project or program like you said you would, when you said you would? Now, the outcomes, again, this is what they're paying for. And this is basically defining who will make what change, by how much, where, and by when. It's always, what has been the benefit of this project? How have things or people changed as a result of your intervention? And for example, by December 2013, at least 200 African American and Latino young adults ages 24 to 35 were reported an increase in their intention to use condoms. If I'm a funder, I understand exactly what I'm getting here because I understand by December 2013, 200 African American and Latino young adults, 24 to 35, I know who, I know how many, and they will report an increase in their intention to use condoms. I know exactly what I'm getting and I know exactly what I'm paying for. And that's what's important to a funder. If you're not comfortable writing an objective, well, let me give you some basic components that need to be in every objective. There always needs to be a description of the activity or service that you're going to do, the result of this activity or service, some type of tool in terms of how you will measure this, the standard of success, and the number who will benefit from this. You want all these components in every objective. And though it may seem like a lot, it's really a very short sentence that really can compile all this information together. A better way of looking at it, if you look at the objectives format on slide 10, this is a great tool using those components. There's always going to be two, which is some type of action or statement of results. There's going to be a degree of change and a deadline. If you follow this format, you will likely put together a strong objective. And let's look at the example. For this particular program, the objective was to increase by at least one grade level the reading skills of 75% of the children who complete the reading enrichment program. If you look closely at that statement, it actually answered all of our questions we've talked about in the objective components. What is the program trying to do? Well, they wanted to improve the reading skills of 75% of the children who complete the reading enrichment program. We know what they're trying to do, improve the reading skills. By how much? By at least one grade level. And for who? For 75% of the children who complete the reading enrichment program. So the answer to the last question, well, when will this take place? By the completion of the program. So we understand who, we understand what we're trying to get, we understand how we're going to look at it, and we understand when it will be completed. And that makes that a strong objective. In terms of process versus outcome objectives, if you look at these examples, you can ask yourself, well, which one is process and which one is an outcome? And I'll let you take a look at these, and then you let us know what you think the answers are. The first one is to improve the reading level of 25 middle school youth by an average increase of at least one reading level on a standardized reading level test. Well, this one is an outcome objective. And again, I understand what they're trying to do, when they want to do it, and by how much. Let's go to the second one. To recruit 20 high school students by the end of the semester from high school for a training program given by Stetson University students. Now, is this one a process or an outcome objective? If you look at it closely, this is a process objective. Again, this is a step or a stage in the implementation of a program. They're recruiting these students. We don't have an outcome. We have a step. Let's go to number 3. To provide 40 hours of parenting training to 100 teen parents, resulting in 80% enrollment and 50% participation in activities of a 6-month parent-child education program. Is this one a process or an outcome objective? And again, if you look closely at this again is a process objective. Again, this is an implementation stage within the project. You're providing 40 hours of parenting training. And even though you're saying, well, I see a result. Well, then the result was really just a change in the enrollment or a change in participation. There wasn't a change in the participant. So again, this is just a step or an activity in implementing the overall program. Let's go to the last one. By 12/20/31/2003, the Creative Healing Center will have increased from 10% to 50% the percentage of patients who say they feel emotionally prepared to leave the hospital at discharge. Is this a process or outcome objective? And if you said this was an outcome objective, you would be correct. Again, there is a change in the participant. And we see this change or this result in terms of who, at what point in time, and what will occur. So I hope this helped begin to help you distinguish between a process and an outcome objective. Now that we've talked about goals and objectives, that really sets the groundwork for us to move forward toward logic models. And nowadays, a logic model is not only important for you in terms of program development and your evaluation, but there are very few funders that are not going to ask for a logic model, because a logic model provides a one-page snapshot of what your program is, what you need, what you're trying to do, and what you hope to accomplish. Now, key phrases in this part is logic and model. And with the logic piece, It means that it makes sense and it flows from one component of the logic model to the other one. And the best way to look at it, a logic model shows a series of if-then relationships. And they tend to be, if I implement this a certain way as intended, it's going to lead to a desired outcome. And we'll talk about that shortly. When you look at a basic logic model, the most simple logic models are going to have at least four components: inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. That's your most basic logic model. When we're talking about inputs, these are the resources that are going to go into your program. This is your staff, your funding, your curriculum, your supplies. If this was a recipe, it'd more or less be the ingredients. So, what are the ingredients necessary for you to develop this program? Or look at it like this: if someone who had no knowledge of your program was to do so, what do they need to pull together? What do they need to have in place to begin this program? The next one is the activities. And these are the actual program interventions that you're doing, or as it says, the activities you're doing day to day, week to week. The output are the tangible results of these activities. In many cases, we also call them the deliverables. And then finally, we get to the outcomes, which is the change or the benefit as a result of the activities. Remember when I told you that a logic model shows an if-then relationship? And it tends to go back to this if A then B kind of piece. Well, here's the thing. And here's why I say it goes back to it being logical. If you look at a common problem in terms of logic models, it tends to be that folks can't show the correlation between an activity and an outcome. If you're doing this, and I'll give you an example shortly, if it doesn't line up or make sense, then you need to rethink your program strategy. Let's go with the basic if-then assumptions of a logic model. We start out with, you need certain resources to operate your program. And again, it goes back to these inputs. If you have access to these resources, then you can use these resources to accomplish your planned activities. And if you accomplish your planned activities, then you can deliver the amount of product or service that you intend. And if you accomplish your planned activities to the extent intended, then your participants will benefit in a specific way. And if these benefits to participants are achieved, then certain changes in organizations, communities, or systems or individuals will occur under these conditions. These are your if-then assumptions, and they need to flow throughout your entire logic model. When we're talking about the inputs, again, these are the resources you need to deliver your program, your ingredients, more or less. And we're talking about things such as staff, volunteers, money, materials, equipment, technology, partners. And you actually list these on the logic model, and you want to get specific. Again, think of this as a recipe. If you run a program, it's not sufficient to say staff. You may want to say instead, I need 2 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee. Or you may say, we need 12 volunteer mentors or materials. We need a laptop, a projector, and a curriculum. Basically, treat this as the ingredients for the recipe of your program and list what a person would need to actually be able to implement the program. These are your inputs. Then we get to the activities, and the activities are split into 2 parts. One is who you're going to reach specifically, whether these are clients, agencies, or participants. It may be 100 youth or 25 adults ages 24 to 35. Whatever it is, you want to be specific. And the same thing with the activities. What are the activities that your program will be conducting? Whether it's trainings or sessions or services that you're going to deliver or product or resources that you're going to produce, you want to list out what these are, and these will go under the activity section within your proposal, within your logic model. Now, again, to make outputs make more sense, this is the tangible result of your activities. And again, it goes back to those process measures we were talking about before. These outputs are also known as deliverables or milestones in a work plan or a timeline. And with that, it may be an activity, maybe the delivery of services or the output. For example, if an activity is, we're going to deliver tutoring sessions, Well, the output would be we will have conducted 50 tutoring sessions by June 2003. So again, the activity says what you're going to do. The output describes to what extent. If you look at something such as satisfaction, and a lot of times folks list satisfaction as an outcome, satisfaction is actually an output. And I say this is important because a lot of times folks will say, in their final program evaluation, 100 people in our program were satisfied, with the project. That's nice. Don't get me wrong. But if the purpose of your program was to raise the grade level or the reading level of 100 children, they could love you, they could love your project, they could love your staff. But if they can't read at a higher level, then the program was not a success, even though they may have been very satisfied with your staff or your program. So please don't confuse satisfaction with an outcome unless the whole point of your program was to make people happy. Satisfaction is an output and should be listed as such. And we're talking about outcomes. Again, these are the changes or the benefits that occur as a result of your program. And you need to highlight these. And these are reflected in three ways, well, actually four ways, and sometimes generally three within a logic model. There's the short term, the medium, the long, and the impact. Short term are changes in learning, medium are changes in actions or behaviors, and long terms are a change in the conditions. And if they ask for an impact, it's a change in the system. And the great thing is, even as we talk about these outcomes, they still follow the if then logic. For example, if there's a change in my learning, short term, then there will be a change in my action or behavior, medium. And if there's a change in my actions or behaviors over a period of time, then long term, there will be a change in my overall condition. And if my condition changes over time, or several individuals' conditions change over time, then we'll see an impact on a community or a system. So again, it still follows the if then logic. When we're talking about short term outcomes, we're talking about things such as a change in your learning, your awareness, your knowledge, your attitude, your skills, opinions, aspirations, motivation, or your intent. These things need to change before there's a change in your behavior. So your short-term outcomes, and this tends to be more immediate. After you do an intervention or immediately following your program, you'll see these things change. For example, let's say the whole point of my project was to do a health and nutrition program, and you want to make me healthier. Well, if I'm not aware that I'm not healthy, I'm not going to change anything. If I don't know how to do proper nutrition or how to exercise and work out, I'm not going to change. If my attitude toward it is poor, you see where I'm going with this? Before you can change behavior, you need to change some aspect of your short term learning. That's what's reflected in the short term outcome. With a medium term outcome, now we're looking at a change in your behaviors or your decision making, or if you're an organization, your policies, or if you're a community, the social action that's taking place. And again, as a result of a short term outcome, now there's a change in one of these areas. And if you change one of these areas long enough, then we start to see a change or a long term outcome, which may be a change in your condition, your well being, your health, your economic level, your educational level, your civic participation, the environmental impact, your financials, your employment status. Basically, if you learn something and you do something differently or you do something well, then you're going to get a long term objective. As far as an impact statement goes or impact outcomes, some funders will request this. And I don't want this to scare you. The bottom line with this is they're looking for what change will happen in a community or an area as a result of your program. What will be the impact? Don't get scared, because the best you can say is that you believe you played a role or there's a correlation. We're not trying to establish cause. And it's mainly because when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with communities, you're not dealing with what we call a closed environment. If this was a research project in a lab, then I can control outside factors. For example, let's say I was doing a juvenile justice gang prevention program. Now, some youth may leave a gang as a result of the program. Others, it may have been a matter of some other family member or caring adult talked to them and said, hey, this is not the life for you, and they leave. It could be a result of they got arrested and now they're scared and they say, look, I don't want to go to jail. I can't do this anymore. Or it could be a matter of they had a near death experience or they saw something happen to a friend. There's a whole host of reasons for why a young person may have left the gang. It may have been my program, it may have been something else. But what I like to say, based on the results and the outcomes of my program, I believe we played a role or we had some type of impact. And that's generally what you're saying with an impact statement. Again, impact occurs over an extended period of time. And because of that, most folks don't expect you to evaluate it rigorously, but it's more so what do you believe will occur as a result of your project or your program? Again, outputs versus outcomes. And we did it the same way you look at process measures versus outcome measures. It's always a matter of what you do versus what are the results. Outputs are what the program does, or the services, or the activities. The outcome are the results or the benefits. And always keep in mind, you want to focus on the outcomes. You want to focus on the benefits. Where a lot of proposals go wrong is the writer or the organization will focus on the services they provide. Keep this in mind. Services tell, outcomes sell. And what I mean by that is services tell what you do. And that's good. And that's useful information. But an outcome explains what was the benefit, what is the change, what is the result. It shows what am I paying the money for. And that's what I mean outcomes sell because that is what funders and donors are paying for. Again, another way to go back to the other piece, outputs demonstrate process objectives, while outcomes demonstrate final outcome objectives. And I hope that's clear for you right now. In terms of using a logic model for an evaluation, it is key. And I also usually tell folks, please engage your evaluator as you develop your logic model. And it's mainly because they can tie the evaluation directly to what's in there. More importantly, it helps us know what and when to measure. Are you more interested in the process or the outcomes? I would usually argue you're more interested in the outcomes, but a lot of funders still want to know that you're implementing it correctly because they understand some interventions, regardless of how strong they are, if they're implemented incorrectly, you're not going to get the result. In terms of a logic model evaluation, if you look at slide 26, it kind of shows you based on the area what we're looking at. If I'm looking at the needs of the situation, then it's basically here's the basic functions or parts of a needs assessment. Once we get to outputs, now we're doing our process evaluation. Once we get to the outcome evaluation. And then finally looking at the impact. Probably a better way of looking at it is this next one. Again, if you look at slide 27, you can see how the evaluation questions line up with each portion of a logic model. Also, you see at the bottom indicators that can you use, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the evaluation section or the evaluation class. These are the indicators to prove or to provide the evidence that you're actually making progress in your evaluation. So again, a logic model is a great tool because not only does it help you explain and design your programs, but it also sets the framework for your evaluation. That's all we have. And we'll just see if there are any questions that you have. If not, then we thank you for your participation and we'll see you next week.